Give it a minute. Presty, we are now live.
How are we doing?
We need to chat a load of nonsense for a minute. Just while I check to make sure we are being heard.
Luckily, I'm a pro at that.
And in a minute, we're going to jump into some cool stuff. Let's have a look. Everyone, really sorry if we find this really boring, but I need to make sure that we're coming live, loud and clear. Cool stuff. We are. Right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, guys.
I've said in the past on these things that I've really wanted to do these more consistently, and I really haven't. And Preston and I's live is well overdue. Really sorry, Preston.
No worries.
And I'll talk about the two P's in the pod, right? Because Preston and Perry. You see what I've done there? And we're sitting there looking like 20s as well.
You know,
branded merch.
All in the same pod.
But I wanted to get Preston on because it's been awesome, some of the things that he's been doing with Power Bespoke. And he joined us. When was it, Preston?
January.
January. We'll have a quick overview on the background, as in worked in property previously, come out short term, wanted to get back into property. We started chatting. But since then, it's been a real, what's the best way of putting it? Carnage. Roller coaster carnage, yeah. Because of stamp duty holiday and all that kind of stuff. But some of the things you've been doing, I mean, selling properties and helping clients move at near £1 million in Cookfield and a huge country manor over in East Grinstead, West Hoathly. Just put a property live at 1.6 million last week. You're going out to appraise something with 2.5 acres next week. So it's been, I guess we haven't done the live yet because every time we said, let's push it out a week because carnage today. Let's push it out a week. Yeah. So we stopped making excuses because we were both really doing that a lot, and we're jumping on. So give us a really quick background.
Yeah.
Who you are, your family, where you live, and what kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I have certainly a background in property. In London, I worked for a high street agency there, and I got into the market just as the market crashed. So that was good timing. So I took a break to go into healthcare, a bit more of a recruitment-based background. So it kind of kept my, I suppose, my people skills sharp, which is obviously important to be a good estate agent. And I sold a business last year and decided that it was perfect timing to come back to property. But I was very clear that I didn't want to go back to a bit more of a high street setting. I wanted to come in self-employed, and I saw one of your videos, Mr. P, which was really insightful. I really loved the model that you operated with, and more importantly, the brand and the recognition it had in the market. That's why I had to reach out to you, and that got me started with you in Jan.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah, absolutely.
What was it that pulled you back into property?
I think it was always really a first love of mine. Coming from high school and then sixth form, I wasn't really, I wanted to be an actor, but that's a very tough game to get in. And I thought, what can I'm really good with people. I'm not really a shy person. What can I use? What sector can I use these skills in? And property just kind of screamed out at me. I loved the idea of selling houses. I loved the idea of either helping someone buy their first home, or for someone that's, having a bigger family and need to upsize. And that really, really appealed to me.
Maybe that's why, because that's the thing with property, isn't it? I mean, we'll get into some core advice and market kind of insights and all that kind of stuff in a minute, but I think the core of agency isn't selling houses. It's actually the result of that sale or purchase on that person's life. So we talk all the time about we are the enablers. We enable people to move on to the next chapter of their life, and that, I think that responsibility is sometimes taken too lightly in a estate agency. But let's not make this about estate agency. Let's make it about the homeowners and the people out there that are, thinking of moving or trying to move at the minute and not being very successful.
Yeah.
So you live at home with your wife.
Yep.
in East Grinstead,
Yeah.
and your 2 children. And what's the kind of market doing in your area? East Grinstead is a lovely place. Here's a good one. Who's moving to East Grinstead?
Yeah, do you know, it's I never realized actually how popular East Grinstead was until I started working with you. I think it's quite of a mix. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but what I've experienced is certainly the more London-based workforce that were probably living or crammed into a 2-bed flat because of where they work. I think obviously with the pandemic and with more businesses embracing home working, I have found that a lot of that kind of London elite are coming out, and now they're seeing, wow, for £1.2 million, I can get a house with a nice acre plot that's in really good condition. Obviously, for those that don't know East Grinstead, it's got amazing links getting into London Bridge, into London Victoria, and once you're there, London's your oyster. So I think certainly the kind of London professionals are what I've seen. But also, I mean, there are certain people that are kind of just making a sidestep. They've probably been in their property for north of 10. Well, someone that I helped move recently had been in their property for 40 years, and just
That was one in Cookfield, right? Was it Cookfield?
No, sorry, that's the one in Wymill
Yeah.
Lane, Bridge. Yeah, she's been there 40 years.
And what I love about that, as in people moving out, is that was you, right? That was you and your wife moving out of, was it Croydon?
Yeah, Wallingham. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you're the perfect example of a big market of people that are actually wanting to move to the area you've now moved to as well, which is why I love agency, because it's the empathetic side. Me and my wife are in the same position. We want to get out for the schools or a bit of slower pace of life or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And what would you say the kind of best price points are doing? Because that's quite, I think, read the media, the market's crazy, but that's very, in any market, you've got micro markets. And what micro market inside the market would you say is the kind of one that's on the most heat at the minute?
I'd probably say quite easily that kind of 900 to 1.2 million pound price bracket is something that is, they're coming on the market and they're moving quickly. An example would be the one in Cookfield, which I had on for 48 hours, and it was I didn't even launch that onto the market. They didn't go online. That went straight into a handful of people that I know were looking and missed out on a previous property, and that went under offer in 48 hours and 25 grand above the asking. So, and another example is the other property in Ashurst Wood. Again, at that kind of sweet spot around the 950 mark, that went under offer in its first week. So I am finding that kind of price range. I mean, there are I do have property on the market at that 1.5 million bracket. It's moving a bit slower than I anticipated, if I'm honest. And I think, given the area and the properties that I've been working with, I haven't really seen that much below that 900 bracket or 800 bracket as yet.
It's that supply, I guess, isn't it? Which is driving craziness. Yeah. So to answer the question, I say 900 to 1.2 is probably the strongest market for me, anyway. And what would you say? I guess because of all that, what are prices doing? Because you read news articles and they're very regional, national. Are they going up? You're kind of local, and by local I mean your East Grinstead is where you live, and that's where you obviously can serve easier. But you've got clients in Reigate, you've got clients in Hawley, and where in general, where would you say the kind of what prices are doing? Going up, going down, staying flat?
Yeah, I certainly would say they're not going backwards. They are. I mean, if you take kind of the Cookfield, Ashurst Wood, East Grinstead market, they're very, very stable. Cookfield, I'd probably say, is still retaining a pricing that's going up because it's such a niche little village.
Well, that's probably a micro market inside a micro market, isn't it? I guess that's Absolutely. Your kind of southeast, West Sussex, Cookfield.
But certainly, from a more of a general point of view, it's definitely stable. It's not bad, which is good.
And I guess that ties in. That works really well because I guess we'll talk about the 2 Ps, but the kind of the 3 Ps when it comes to selling a property successfully is your price, your presentation, and your promotion. So let's touch on a little bit of what kind of your number one tip for someone sitting there watching this now thinking, I'm on the market, not going too well, I've been on for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, or someone that's thinking about moving now. What would your kind of number one tip be, given that you're seeing it on the front line, the inquiries coming in or not, if the pricing and that kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, the first thing that came to mind, something you just said, is I think just having a realistic expectation on price, making sure that we're pricing right. I mean, one of the common questions I always ask when I go to meet someone is, what is your ideal target price? Because that will tell me kind of where the expectations are sat. I would have done a lot of research beforehand to know how that road is performing, or how the area in general is performing, what has recently sold, what hasn't sold. So yeah, I would say the market will always dictate to us what the right price is. But I think how we launch the property and the pricing expectations in the lead up is, I'd say, the most important factor.
And that's the worry in what we call a crazy market or a rising market, is that, and I've seen it myself a lot with where people have come to us, maybe the current agent hasn't been successful in selling the property, and they've maybe, perfect example, you go and see a house 3 months ago because the seller needs some advice, and they say, oh yeah, looking at the market, these comparables, that comparable, this competition, that competition, you're probably going to sit around the 1 million mark. Someone else tells a 1.1, and then they ended up speaking to you again in 8 weeks' time because they haven't sold it. I think that's where the crazy market can get ahead of yourself a little bit, because as soon as you, at 1 million, that property would have probably got 12, 13, 14 viewings and offers, and maybe sold at 1,010,000 or 1,020,000 or 1,050,000.
Absolutely.
When you price it at 1.1, you then kill that interest because it's no longer really good value in the market. It's now sitting at the top of what else is available. And you kill the interest, might have 3, 4, 5 viewings versus 10. So I think that's bang on in terms, that's what I'm seeing as well, is we're always, I think as a company, everyone in the team's always too good and too honest for their own good at times. I've seen a few properties where we've appraised them what we feel, and a really important thing to remember is, as long as the marketing is done, the property will find its value, and a good agent will influence that by 1 or 2% with really good negotiation, but not 5, 10%, because that's the market determines what a house is ultimately worth based on what else they can buy for a certain amount of money. So I think it's, without spending hours talking about your presentation, how it should be promoted and where and that kind of stuff, I think the core, because a stunning house promoted and presented in an incredible way, but it's 15% overpriced, isn't gonna work. A well-priced property with a guide price, so that you're leaving some room there for if a buyer is happy to pay more, then they'll offer it. But it's the old adage. It's tricky to get your head around, and for a lot of people, but the lowest price houses tend to sell for the highest price, as opposed to putting that higher figure on it and hoping someone comes along and offers you it.
And I think that's where the agent comes in. Is we can't influence the people that are going online to look for a property. The first thing they're going to look for is the price. But what we can influence is that person when we've got them there to show around. And the only way we can do that is, as you said, great marketing, but ensuring that we're entering into the market at the right price. A good agent will always, I believe, will achieve more than expected, given the opportunity.
Let's touch on quickly, because you've been really successful in, probably what we don't talk about enough with our service, I guess, and without this being a sales pitch to people, but the biggest problem when the market's so busy like it is now and there's a lack of supply, the biggest worry and concern for people is, great, I'll sell my house, no doubt, very quickly, but there's nothing on the market right now that I would like potentially look to buy or look at. Talk through kind of how you've been, because you've done really well in finding off-market properties for clients who have got that buyer. The one in Crawley, I'm also that you've done recently. What you're doing and how are you finding that's working for clients that are worried about the purchase side of things?
I think that is always one of the number one obstacles. Is I want to sell for the best price, but what happens when I do sell? And that's something that I've certainly tried to focus on for any of my clients. And there's lots of ways to be creative, but typically something that's really working well for me is really structuring some really well written, well presented letters on behalf of my clients to say they're coming onto the market. We should be close to a sale soon, and based on the criteria that they've given me, I think your house would be perfect. I find that tends to work really well. It gets some great interest, and it makes the whole process a lot smoother for everyone involved. You know, they haven't gone through a grueling marketing process. They haven't been misguided elsewhere, and so expectations aren't aligned. And I think the ability to control the complete transaction is a lot better. So that's just one of the ways that
and that's quite
most. Yeah,
that's quite. It's so simple. It's genius, right? So you sit in a client's living room or garden, and you have a little chat and say, "Great, so you've got this lovely house. Yeah, what would, once this is sold, what are you looking to buy?" And they might say, "Well, you know, a 3-bed detached, ideally with a quarter of an acre plot, because I can't maintain the 2 acres that I've currently got or the large garden I've got." And then would say, "Well, any particular areas you quite like?" And they're like, "Oh, I love this road and that road, or that part of East Grinstead or this part." And because we've got access to such incredible data sets, we can log in, bring up every house in the road, ones that haven't changed hands in the last 7 years, because they're most likely to maybe be looking to move. No point sending it to someone that moved in and bought it last year. And off the back of that, like you said, really well written letters. And I had one recently, which is a really good. She's been thinking of moving for 2 years, but she held off because of COVID, because they were both fairly elderly and they didn't want viewings through their house. So we arranged a one-off viewing for our client. They loved it and they're buying it. And the seller's happy because they've not got to go on the market and be splashed over Rightmove and have loads of different families for every weekend. So it's really interesting that, I guess, what would your advice be if someone is worried about that and are holding off their life move, downsize, upsize, sideward step, relocation, because of the fear of not finding somewhere? What would your kind of tip or advice be there?
I would say first and foremost is trust the agent. I think there are lots of ways. You don't necessarily have to be dictated by the sale of your property. I think there's lots of ways to try and manage that kind of time frame. Or, for example, the off-key approach has been something that has worked for me really, really well. In that, there's a couple of properties that I'm taking on where really they're not in a position even to move until March. So we're still a good while away, at least a minimum of 6 months. So we can market it low key and just manage the expectations of the person coming to see it. Like you said, you're not splashed all over Rightmove, so you're not getting the full force of the market, which means ultimately we as the agent can control that process. So don't let it. I suppose my advice would be not to let it hold you back from contacting an agent, getting your property appraised, and then we can discuss a process or a strategy that meets your time frame. It's not all about just slapdash, get some pictures done, throw you online and see what happens. That's certainly not my approach.
And that's really, really good advice, because I think that is probably the thing people think happens the most. Let's not talk to agents yet because we're not ready to move yet because we're worried about this or that, or whereas actually engage an agent 6 months before you actually think you will go on the market. Start speaking to them. They might, because it's really tricky, isn't it? Because it's chicken or the egg. Unless you're searching for a property and you're in a proceedable position, you're probably going to be pipped to the post by other buyers who are proceedable in this crazy market. Yeah. So I'm a massive fan right now of, even if you can't find somewhere, get yourself under offer. Be very transparent with your buyers, because you might find a buyer that's in rented for the next 6 months anyway. So it works well for them. That you then got a bird in the hand, a buyer in the pocket, and then you can go out looking in a proceedable position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more often than not, if it's the right property for the buyer, they will wait. I think stamp duty, the stamp duty holiday has created a bit of a feeling of being rushed to, and everything's just gone absolutely crazy. And I think one of the biggest mistakes anyone could make that's considering coming on the market is to think they're coming into that kind of situation again. Or I don't want to call the agent, because then I'll never get rid of them for the next 3
Yeah, that's fair, isn't it? Yeah, every week.
That's not the case. Yeah, I think have confidence in the agent. Transparency is key, and you can leave us pretty much to do the rest.
And that, I think that's huge advice. Start talking early. Start talking early to an agent. Method of sale, not even touched on this. Maybe it's a whole nother thing, but don't assume that you just got to go on the market in the normal way like everyone else. I had a client call me a couple of weeks ago, and it ended up being that for his situation, we're going to actually put the property for sale via public auction. He'd never considered that, but given all the things he's got personally happening, that was the best solution for his situation, because he couldn't afford the time potential delays of a private treaty sale. He couldn't risk a chain or a sale collapsing 2 months into a transaction. So start chatting early. Ring Preston probably is the simplest answer to that question. Think about method of sale. Don't wait for something to come on Rightmove that matches your requirements, because we've got strategies in place to get chatting to those people 3-6 months before they even would appear on Rightmove.
Absolutely.
And have a more managed, strategized move. You touched on it. The strategy is really important. I love that. 22 minutes is a really good little sesh.
There we go. No,
Great
it's been good
advice.
fun. Yeah.
We need to do these more often, like just chat.
Yeah.
2 peas in a pod chatting stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will take some actual good nuggets out of it and help them on their move.
Absolutely.
I will link below this video, or you can just find Preston on Facebook, search for Preston Power Bespoke, and you can drop his page a message, ring the office, drop me a message. If anyone needs any help or advice, we're always here. Thanks for jumping on. We've finally done it. Only January, February, March, April, May, June. 5 months down the line. Yeah. But let's get another one in the next couple of months.
Sounds good.
Cheers for your time, my man.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
See everyone later. Take care.
Cheers, guys.